This program is brought to you by Globus.
Europe's democratic shield, protection, or a power control method. As the rules-based others flatter, critics warn that Europe continues to chart a course that advances globalist interest. In 2025, the European Commission launched the European Democratic Shield, a platform that claims to counter foreign interference, disinformation, and electoral manipulation, among others. Indeed, a paradox in itself, Europe's radical foreign policy stances, complex security architecture, and economic dictates often suffocate the working class while protecting the interests of the selected few. Thus, Europe faces a new battleground, not of tongues and borders, but of narratives, platforms, and votes that it largely created for itself. This is according to some viewpoint, purportedly designed as an essential defense against the Kremlin-style meddling and other external threats. Critics warn the shield could centralize power, police political speech, and blur the line between protection and control. A democracy shield in court becomes a paradox when it defends democracy by lifting the freedoms it claims to protect, disrupting electoral calendars. We can take the case of Ukraine, among other countries. And of course, the real question that we ask during this program, among others, is whether Europe needs a shield. But then, who decides what it is shielding from the global world? And of course, who watches the shield itself? Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen, as we, of course, get into greater insights looking at this democratic shield and of course how it is altering the narratives of the multipolar world. And with a panel of experts, we are going to uncover still if there are already alternative organizations to give practical respect to the electoral sovereignty, information, and the aspect of international relations and collaborations in line with the tenets of democracy. I'll join you right after the jingle. Welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, today we look at democracy in a multipolar society, and our focus is on the Europe's democratic shield. We want to understand what it's all about, of course, and asking very hard question: if Europe is actually shielding democracy, who watches those in charge of fact checking, and of course, how do we ascertain the line between protection and power controlled? Without much ado, we dive straight to uncovering the panel, and we are glad to introduce to you Honor Dovely, international lawyer, also political commentator, very keen on international politics. A pleasure having you on this timely topic, dear Arnold. We're also glad to welcome Dragana Trikovic, Director of the Center for Geostrategic Studies, joining us from Serbia.
Good evening to all, and thank you very much, dear Clarice, for having me.
And we're looking forward to having a very constructive analysis with you pertaining our topic for discussion. And let's go to Switzerland to welcome for the first time on this platform Professor Dr. Zorana Viktorovic, author and international relations professor. It's a pleasure having you on Global Insight this day.
Greetings from Switzerland. This means good evening or hi from Switzerland. Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you for accepting our invitation, Professor Zuran. And to India, let's acknowledge the presence of Shirab Sharma, international relations expert and assistant professor of political sciences. You're welcome to this platform again.
Thank you, Gladys. Good evening, everyone. Good evening from India, and thank you for having me. Good to be back here again.
Thank you so much. Let's also welcome Yulia Berg, political scientist, founder of Global Experts Club. It's a pleasure having you once more, dear Yulia.
Yes, greetings from Africa and happy to join today's program.
Thank you so much, and of course, welcome to Mother Africa as we continue to talk what is of utmost importance to the global world. Just to note that Penny Arkers will be joining us subsequently. Okay, I've just been informed that she's already there. Alto and Minnesota team captain of the Center for Political Innovation, joining from the United States of America. Welcome to the program this day.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Do you see me?
Unfortunately, I cannot see you, but I can hear you perfectly well, dear Penny.
Okay, my video is on, but thank you for having me. Maybe I'll come out and come back in and see if you can see me.
Absolutely, of course. If everything is okay with Arnold, we are going to ride off with you, especially on the interpretation of our topic for discussion, Europe's democratic shield, protection or power control. What comes to mind when you hear of such an initiative that actually states that it wants to counter a purported Kremlin-style manipulation of or interference in electoral processes. So, what holistic analysis can you present to such a platform?
Quasi-foreign minister for the EU, Joseph Borrell, referred to as far as the EU called it the garden in the middle of the jungle. It turns out that the garden is actually more like a golden cage, and that those unelected bureaucrats, by and large, are feeling the lack of legitimacy that surrounds the EU, increasingly so now, owing to the lack of economic prosperity, owing to the policies that are being led and implemented against the interest of the people of the European Union. And with the increased lack of legitimacy in, I think it was in August 2024, the EU announced the implementation of the DSA, Democratic Shield. The reason, the rationale that was brought forward at the time by a former commissioner, EU Commissioner Thierry Breton, was that there was counter narratives, which they referred as fake news, whether bearing on Russian viewpoints or later on after the election of Donald Trump, bearing on their bête noire, which is who happens to be Elon Musk. and the fact that through X is regulated by the First Amendment of the US Constitution. So there's no censorship by and large, save for one particular topic, which we're not going to get into today. But for, suffice it to say, for all intended purpose, X is a space where opinions, diverging opinion may express themselves. And so the DSA basically was put together in that sense to try to regulate the speech in ways, unprecedented ways, and above and beyond that, interfere in election cycles, processes of EU members, but not only, including also would-be EU members. That includes countries like Romania, Moldova. There are talks about outlawing and banning outright political parties, including potentially the AfD in Germany. And we just found out a couple of days ago that the European Court of Justice, which is the supreme judicial body within the EU, has decided that it would be now quasi-criminal to relay articles from Russia Today, for instance, and that although it is not yet illegal to read those, we can see where this is going, and at some point we're going to be probably seeing cases of people having merely relayed some of those posts, whether on Telegram or elsewhere, get visited from by the local police, since all the national police through Eurogender 4 is now more or less coalescing into a quasi EU federal state police. We can anticipate that before long we will see people being prosecuted merely for relaying what Brussels considers views that are inimical to their view of the world. So this is the state of affairs now. In as far as the DSA aims at basically preventing patients from escaping the asylum, and or making sure that those would be countries who would join the EU for geopolitical reasons, most likely first and foremost, since economically many of the would-be candidates are not meeting the criteria. But suffice it to say that the DSA is this kind of great equalizer. And so we are really stepping into something uncharted territory, to be sure.
Thank you so much. Of course, understanding democracy in the context of Europe and also in a multipolar setting. In the summer perspective, let me get from you, dear Yulia, your holistic analysis of Europe's democratic shield and what it represents, especially in line with the flow of information and of course internal policies and aspects of sovereignty in a multipolar setting?
Well, unfortunately, we have come to times when nothing gets a clear definition, and a lot of the wordings that do sound nice are being used as a repression mechanism, and are being used in order to promote own interests under the cover of human rights, values, and whatsoever else. So just recently, we have seen another interesting legal occasion. Even reposting news from Russia Today is becoming almost illegal. So this can cause direct consequences to the one who just reposts information from a media outlet. If this is not some harsh censorship, I don't know what it is. And it's always very interesting to see the same people talking about human rights and spreading democracy and imposing the real so-called democratic rules and procedures on the countries worldwide, to be using such repressive methods as we observe, especially in the UK and in many other countries, not to mention the Baltic states of the European Union, that have actually banned a lot of symbols, a lot of things, and the next phase would be just burning books, I suppose, because this is the only thing that has not happened yet. So, of course, living in times of global transformation and in times of global clashes that we observe all over the place, every country, every society tries to protect itself from information wars that are outbreaking. Yet at the same time, the hypocrisy that has reached some tremendous levels is definitely unprecedented. So probably it's the first time in human history, and unfortunately, those are the times when information exchange has become so, technically speaking, easy that it could have been moving the progress and the joint efforts in order to develop the planet we're living in. Unfortunately, it's being used otherwise. And the recent set of statements voiced by the European leaders and the recent set of actual court decisions and actual practices used by investigative bodies and related ones are showing us the opposing trend, and are showing us that the words are becoming pretty much meaningless, and the only thing we can actually rely on is our own moral compass to help us navigate through fake news, to help us navigate through false statements and false values that are being discussed but not being used in practice, unless they're talking about the beautiful garden of the European Union surrounded by wild jungle of everyone else.
And of course, the paradox that we seek to understand this time around, let's go to meet Dr. Zuranag, having his own holistic interpretation. Of course, you are in Switzerland, and we know recently the role that Switzerland has been playing, especially in line with the Ukraine crisis and other aspects, of course. Now putting its policy of non-alignment to the test. So from your own perspective, what do you think is the state of democracy in Europe, and how does it probably align with the pillars of this democratic shield as outlined by the European Commission, and aspects of preserving information, enhancing democratic quality, also, of course, increasing social resilience, among other aspects underlined by the tenets of this democratic shield?
First of all, democracy is from beginning is the best possible political form. What we know, the problem which Europe has, actually, European Union as a system right now, and I deeply believe in European Union, but as a model to stop any clashes inside of Europe. But in which direction this will go on, I really cannot answer, because I agree with previous speaker. What we have here is huge hypocrisy. It's something, the main rule in democracy, just let's say so, is to have open critique against all mistakes. What we have here something very strange. And even in Switzerland, if you criticize anyone in European Union, if you criticize Vladimir Putin, Russia, China, everything is allowed except when you criticize Swiss system. So this is also really very strange, but it is as it is. In every strategic concept, so if you try to learn something more about strategy, you will find there are two very important points. One is so-called strategic dilemma, and the second is distance power index. Strategic dilemma, it's what we have right now. Previous speaker says if you repost from Russia Today, etc., you can go in jail right now in Europe. This is not only if you repost from Russia Today. If you repost anything from Chinese media, even sometimes anything from Indian media, you will have also serious problems. The same is if you will repost something inside of Europe from European media. I will give you just one short example at the beginning. The German government is trying now to reboost the economy, to solve social problems, etc. But just yesterday, on second German TV station, ZDF, we had her Vice Chancellor of German government, Lars Klingbeil, who says that the government is preparing a 33-point package, etc., etc. And point 32 is the new law about information, where even in Germany it will be very difficult to criticize policy of German government. But this now needs to go to the German parliament. Let's see what will be with that. But it is on the way. And in the same time, right now, official statistic office of German government, so those are official information from German side, so Chinese propaganda or Russian propaganda, we are talking about official information from German official statistic office. They said that every fifth German retired person is living now in total poverty. That every sixth average German is right now a citizen, is living right now on a borderline of extreme power, extreme poverty. So what does it mean? This means that the system is really under the huge crisis. And I think that I will agree with Professor Dr. Dragana Tripkovic, because she says before a few months, if I remember well, and Dragana, please be so kind to correct me if I say something wrong, you say that we have now filled battlefield of narratives. And we have that. We have that battlefield because I spoke today with some military strategic experts from Switzerland and from other countries. Just this morning, I talked with a few of them, and all of them says Europe is in confusion. Yes, they are in confusion, and yes, we have this problem of distance power. What is distance power? It's a concept which actually was developed in Soviet Union. After that, Americans developed that concept, and under the very famous title soft power. But distance power is more precise concept, and distance power says how much average citizen see the distance between him and the person who is making some decisions. And that is what our dear friend Arno says before a few minutes, legitimacy of the European representative in Brussels. Average European citizen doesn't feel that those people are representing him. And that is the reason why when you have autistic person, that's very known phenomenon in psychology and medicine, doesn't see you and listen you. Our autistic person is doing what he wants in that moment. So I think that European politicians who are now running European Union are actually some kind of autists. That is from me from the beginning for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Zuran. And of course, it's always good to give the holistic view. Europe indeed is in a state of confusion. And it is on that note that will come to you, dear Dragana, to understand how democracy will actually thrive in such a complex environment. Do we have, based on what Professor Zorana said, can we attest to the fact that it is not just about ensuring democracy, but then controlling power that favors the globalists, as some critics of this initiative have underlined?
Yes, thank you very much, dear Clarice. I agree totally with Arno and Julia that this program is for achieving their own geopolitical goals, I will say. So basically, we need to understand what is program, what is about. It's necessary to say that it's a new program of European Commission adopted in November 2025, I think. And I think it's a program with a totally wrong name, Democratic Shield, because exactly it's a shield for European Commission or for European bureaucracy, something like this. Why I'm saying that it's a shield for European Commission? Because it's very important to understand that Commission isn't directly elected. It means that European Commission has a democratic deficit. So we are now in the situation that the body that is not directly elected is now receiving a mandate, a budget, and also institutional apparatus like Center for Democratic Resilience, the fact checkers, and these DSA protocols to decide what constitutes a threat to democracy at the level of entire continent. I think this is the main problem. Basically, Serbia is not part of EU. Serbia is not the member of European Union, and I'm very happy because of that. Because I think the Europe now is the place. There is no other place where you can find less of democracy, of human protection than Europe. And I really mean this. So Serbia is the candidate for European Union, but I hope so that she never will be the part of EU. Anyway, I think this program is the purpose of this program is to open the space for sharper criticism on EU bureaucracy. We've seen that on this example of medias, Russia Today, but not only Russia Today, the others as well. I think this is against all the people, all experts who have alternative geopolitical position. And I will say that me personally, I have also the problem with EU bureaucracy, with EU system, because EU is using all institutions, judicial system as well, the courts as well, to persecuting these people who have the alternative view, alternative geopolitical view. So I have been subjected to restrictive measures on so-called national security ground, but without being provided with a clear explanation. I don't have any decision and effective opportunity to challenge this decision before a court. So the problem is when national security becomes a justification that cannot be reviewed or constant, the principles of due process, transparency, and the rule of law risk being cancelled totally. So I think the credibility of European institutions ultimately depends not only on protecting security, but also on safeguarding fundamental rights, and including freedom of expression, judicial protection, and the right to an effective legal protection. But as I said, my case confirms that you cannot find any justice in the European Union. So they are illegally and secretly, this is also very necessary to say that they are secretly persecuting the people who have alternative views. They don't like my political position, and that is the reason why they banned me entering in the Schengen zone for 3 years. So for me, there is no democracy in the EU. The EU bureaucracy is acting illegally and secretly against the people, against the experts, against the medias, against the free voices.
As a journalist, you are a journalist very concerned on the international and global affairs. Of course, this is the point of, you know, where many questions are being asked as to the freedom of journalists with alternative mindsets. We're going to come back to that subsequently, dear Dragana, while we get the viewpoint of Shurab on this holistic topic. Recently, we saw the foreign minister of India very vocal about the security architecture of Europe and how it undermines, some sort of the sovereignty of other states when he said that the EU sells arms to be used in India against Indians. And of course, we are still putting this under the banner of this European Shield, which of course has been highlighted as a platform to check democracy. But then let's try to understand the paradox and bring some sort of substantial analysis to the existing platform.
Thank you, Gladys. I'll begin with a couplet that's very famous in India, and I'll translate it for you all. That it says that all my life I kept doing a mistake, that there was dirt on the mirror, dirt on the face, and I kept killing my face. So the dirt has been on your face, and you are cleaning the mirror, and it is not going to help. The bureaucratic rot that has engulfed the European Union and the problems that they're facing, now they're going to take their shelter in what they're calling a democratic shield. The most problematic aspect of this is that they are going to create a binary of pro-democracy and anti-democracy force. Remember, democracy today is universally accepted idea. There is no one who radically opposes the idea of democracy, howsoever problems and problematic it is. But I often say that even North Korea calls itself Democratic Republic of Korea. So even though we know how much democracy is there, some of the concerns that it takes care of is very genuine, and there's no denying that some of the questions regarding cyber operations, disinformation, what the data poisoning, all these things are very much true. But this has a global character. This is not limited to European Union or Europe alone. And for a long time, democracies across world have been facing problems. There have been different challenges and different times. The contemporary times we are facing challenges which are the generative AI, influencing of data, and all these things. The problem emanates from the idea that European Union or the Europe has not been able to get over its penchant with having the white man's burden, that they own the idea of democracy. It is their idea. They have the agency. They have the agency to control. They have the agency to look after it. They have the responsibility to protect democracy. And this is where it becomes very problematic, because if you see, for a very long time we have been taught in our textbooks that Greece and democracy emerged in Europe and in old Greece. But gradually and slowly, more so after when the decolonial approach started to make its voice, we know that there have been a continuous and parallel platforms, democratic platforms across the world. There has been democratic institutions working in India since pre-Christ times, since 6th century, 7th century BC. There have been traces of democracy in Africa. There have been Igbo councils in Nigeria. There have been Gada councils in Botswana and South Africa. So there have been different forms of democratic setting and dialogue, and people coming together and having meeting together to reach to a decision. The problem is when Europe owns the idea that we are the guardian of this very idea of democracy. They start behaving like the superintendent, that they have the responsibility. And this is where if you're not allowing people to retweet, to post tweets or information from other channels, what are you actually going to do? Are you preparing a shield that is even more powerful than which you are going to protect? So this is it reeks of hypocrisy, and it leads to more questions than answers.
Thank you so much for the introductory statement, dear Shreya. And this first part, we run off with you, Penny. We know the United States actually reacted to this democratic shield, and of course, bringing us to that area where we're talking about checking information and, of course, freedom of speech. That is where the turning is. Let's understand this concept and, of course, defining key terms with you for freedom of speech, interference, and how this actually puts especially the social class in some sort of a quagmire as to how to ascertain what it is a right to speak, especially in line with major decision making coming from the EU with global ramifications.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to share the perspective from America. We talk about democracy and Greece. Mr. Sharab was saying that democracy supposedly started in Greece. What we understand is that the buy-in for the wars was more acceptable when the landowners could vote. So if democracy is the rule of the people, it comes with economic development, really. And we see in Africa, especially in West Africa, as they're developing, they're involving the people more in the economy, and they're taking control of the resources to serve and benefit the people in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. But as far as free speech, we saw an extreme crackdown, especially during the Biden administration, against people who spoke out against the Ukraine proxy war against Russia, the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party. Biden tried to throw them in jail for 15 years and fine them each $150,000 for opposing the Ukraine proxy war, accusing them of being Russian agents. And then Scott Ritter, the former UN weapons inspector, was also targeted by the FBI. So our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, when Caleb Maupin and Noah Schenk went to Russia, they actually brought up that case before the UN and before Russia to really highlight the crackdown on free speech, because what we call liberal democracy is really never liberal. It's designed to protect an economic system that's run by Wall Street and London financiers. So we do face the same crackdown on free speech even under Trump, just for different reasons, especially criticism of Zionism. People have been deported for no reason except for speaking out against Zionism. So I would agree that the European shield, democracy shield, is not about democracy, especially when they're sending Ukrainian mercenaries to Africa to destabilize the region and to join with the ISIS fighters, especially in Mali when they had that recent large-scale attack. So as the economic crisis in Europe deepens and America deepens, people are seeing their situation get worse, and they want something better. They want development, and the financiers of London and Wall Street want to stay on top. And so when they talk about democracy, it's a lie, because they don't want to include the people. Like we talked about, the distance narrative. They don't want the people involved. So it's hypocrisy at its best.
And of course, and that is why we ask the question, who actually decides what to shield, and who watches those in line or in charge of fact checking. Coming back to you, Arnold Davely, looking at how these mechanisms or pillars outlined by the European Union actually undermines the new voice, especially from the global south, in line with new perspectives and which align with the new realities of development as far as internal policies, public policy, and the respect of sovereignty is concerned with the new realities of the world. Arnold Davely?
Yes, I'm gonna have to be leaving you in 2 minutes. Suffice it to say that what's going on in the EU, and I would second what the last speaker said, because it also involves the economic collapse, the looming economic collapse in the US. The West and the collective West is facing economic oblivion, and so the upper class is trying to sweep the dust under the rug. And to the extent your question bears on respect for fundamental principles in the context of sovereignty and evolving geopolitical realignment elsewhere, I think no. I think we're going to basically see. I mean, globalization is over. Just in case people might have been wondering about it, the world is again dividing into blocks, and narrative is being massaged in a way that reflects economic prosperity on one side and economic downward spirals in the other. And so when all the, and somebody said earlier, and I agree pretty much with it, that Brussels, the EU, the European project built itself on prosperity and peace. This is how the whole project was sold to us. And to the extent now we have, on average, about 50,000 euros on everybody who's born at this time right now in debt. And that the EU is constantly talking, agitating about a conflict with the Russian Federation. We can see now with, even the most casual, dilettante news consumer can see that something is drastically wrong, and there's somewhat of a disconnect between what they were selling us and the reality. But most importantly, with the bankruptcy befalling European countries now, entire nation states are collapsing under the weight of debt, sheer debt. And so we are seeing now somewhat of the result of ultra neoliberal policies bearing on the destruction of regalian prerogatives of the state. Justice systems don't work. The police is increasingly overwhelmed by instances of hyperviolence. And so the populations of Europe are pretty much left to their own devices now, which itself somewhat tends to be a source of manipulation because, the system, the 1%, as it were, favor an horizontalization of the conflict so that, their responsibility is not engaged. So, no, I don't think we're going to be seeing a reconciliation between, in the wake of those mechanisms being put in place between popular aspiration and the public interest, as it were, and the interest of those who would rule over us. Quite the contrary. We can only hope that they are not going to be taking us to war with a nuclear power. That's number one. If not, that they somehow will be forced to flee at some point because the popular sense of discontent will be so large that it will be unbearable for them to maintain themselves. But we are walking on a ledge, and it's increasingly becoming untenable for them. And so the tensions are such that it's difficult to somewhat be overly optimistic. Although I'm hoping that somehow we may emerge out of this nightmare, without blowing the whole place up. say goodbye to you. I have to run, and I wish you a good continuation on this most interesting debate. Bye bye for now.
Your time, Arnold Dovely, and of course, we are continuing the conversation with you, dear Yulia. When you look at this European Democracy Shield, it directly targets Russia among other countries, especially in highlighting hybrid attacks and elections interference. So, from the Russian perspective, I would love to actually get from you the issues at stake as far as this is concerned, especially in line with the Ukraine crisis and the proxy war, to be more precise.
Well, I think talking about the difficulties that Russia is facing, this is the least of the evils that we are dealing with, and I unfortunately do not only mean the last 4 or 5 years since the beginning of the special military operation, but even before that. So there has been constant pressure, and it was applied in different ways. But if you're talking about the effects and consequences for the country, I think the disaster that was taking place back in the 90s, when I say we, I mean probably the majority of Russians were still thinking that we're somehow friends with the European countries and the United States. They have brought much more of disaster to the country because it was literally being robbed of most of its technology and resources that under the cover of cooperation and bringing in the best democratic practices and the open market were literally taken out. So the consequences for the economy at that time were tremendous because the illusion of the fact that trade could substitute own production has led to a situation in which a lot of things had to be restored starting from 2014 when the first sanctions were. It was a great motivation for redeveloping the economy and production within the country. So the current happening probably will not affect the situation in Russia much, as most of the things that could have happened also in the area of information or imposing personal sanctions or putting pressure directly or indirectly over the ones that are still or have been still, for example, working for the RT or anyhow communicating with the Russian counterparts. So that has been happening for a while by now, and we have already seen examples when some of the RT contributors, the ones who are frequent on Russia Today media, for example, get stopped and interrogated. In the UK, for instance, it happened to Dan Kovalik just recently, a professor from the United States. So I don't think it will be anyhow a major game changer, and it's definitely one of the smallest issues that is being faced. But this condition when pressure is being put militarily everywhere where, let's say, there is the reach of Western counterparts. It's been happening for a while. I mean, even sports are deprived of Russian sportsmen, and the reason why I say so was that they really were bringing competitiveness to a lot of let's say kinds of sports, especially winter sports. Now they're taken out, and it definitely is quite a ridiculous situation when even Russian culture, everything is attempted to be erased, misinterpreted, or demonstrated in a different way, highly demonized, highly highly, let's say, distorted, and every attempt to voice the opinion from the Russian side is getting silenced. Not only because the Western media industry is 100% dominant all over the place, and it is the main source of information for most of the people in the world, but also the let's say the attempts to disseminate information or even have discussions on smaller platforms are also being targeted big time. So the only thing that I can say concluding this is that definitely it's one of the cases when if it's not going to kill us, it's just going to make us stronger, just like the sanctions did when a lot of the areas of economy had to be restructured. A lot of supply chains and production chains had to be restructured. So we'll see how it unfolds. But if there is so much pressure being put on us, something makes us think that we're not on the wrong side.
Before you leave, dear Yulia, it is imperative with the show actually highlighting aspect of sanctions. How then do we, bring forth some sort of a point of compromise where this is not seen as a double standard, especially with the existing European Union foreign policy, especially on aspects of conflict and of course trade?
Well, you see the pressure and the sanctions that were being put on different countries, not just Russia, but let's say Zimbabwe, Iran, and many other countries all over the world. They just make those economies and actors from those countries more creative in terms of coming up with new solutions, payment solutions, trade solutions, whatsoever else. So, I mean, it's not going to be a secret for many that oil trade, for example, has now shifted to a situation in which tankers just meet somewhere in the neutral waters, and then the oil is being transferred from one tanker to another, not even going into a port. And this is what's happening with Iranian oil. This is what's happening to a lot of the oil trade globally right now. So business especially is just like water. It's going to find its way and it's going to flow where it's needed. So oil trade, I think, is a great example. And it was just recently on the news that there are several tankers from Iran now in the neutral waters waiting for their customers just to make the deal happen right away in the waters of the world ocean, right? So businesses are being motivated to elaborate new solutions, and governments follow by changing the rules and regulations. But at the same time, the let's say the unprecedented corruption or unprecedented deals that we see happening around those conflicts are incredible. It was just recently there was just recently some stats published on how much Trump and his related organizations have made on crypto trade and crypto operations. And so it's the amount of money that was made using insider information and manipulating the markets through direct threats or even military operations, just like it was happening in Middle East. It's crazy. When you look at it, it's crazy. So every single time, it's just like the example that I like to give, that back in the like 60s or 70s, when it turned out that the daughter of the Secretary General of the Communist Party had a 3-bedroom apartment. It was a huge corruption scandal that was being widely discussed in the USSR. People were saying, "Oh, he's so corrupt. Look, his daughter has a 3-bedroom apartment just for herself." So we had no idea of what corruption really is back then. I gotta tell you. Now that we see at the scope of what's happening, it seems to be ridiculous, the kind of scandals that were being faced in USSR back then.
Okay, thank you so much. And we're coming back to you, Professor Ziran. Of course, you highlighted that this democracy shield represent a strong force, especially in protecting the tenets of democracy in Europe. But let's try to understand you aside the controversies, some of the checks or maybe threats that Europe's democracy shield is designed to address. And of course, some of the evidence that shows that these threats require a level of intervention as highlighted by the in the preamble of this democratic shield. Is it not actually coming in contradiction with the real situation of many countries, especially small states within the European Union, not able to meet up, especially with the pressure of boycotting Russian oil and, of course, other aspects that have to do with climate change?
Yes, the shield is, let's say, I will try to start from this point. I'm very happy to live in Switzerland. Why? Because still in Switzerland, at least you can say something what you really think and without to feel any harder consequences if you don't touch Swiss policy. Uh, I will just remember you that European Union is actually based on so-called normative power, norms, standards, procedures, etc. And this means that this shield is just one element of this normative power. The another question is how this power will be projected to other parts of the world, what we see every day. And I'm not surprised at all. And mechanism is always the same. And this is very crazy from one side. Let's say so. When the first international conference about recovery of Ukraine was actually it was organized and it has happened in Switzerland. But in a time of preparation, Swiss government has put as the main topic of the conference question of corruption in Ukraine. That was a huge scandal in that moment because that was against all narrative in mainstream media in Europe, and pressure was enormous. So the Swiss government, that was before a few years, changed the title of the conference in a sense, Ukraine after the war. Okay, fine, but when the economic and social problems in Germany grow up, as we had seen today, the situation. I will just repeat what I said before a few minutes. German official statistic office said that every sixth German citizen right now is living on the line of extreme poverty. This means they are in very difficult situation. So now everything is put under the question mark. And one question is also help which was provided to Ukraine, to which was provided to any other country, all other countries in the world, etc. And now they are just repeating the same what we already had heard in a period of preparation of this first conference in Switzerland. And this is a little bit strange. And on other side, how this normative power actually is working in a field. Normative power is working on very simple way. Let's say so. Simple way means they put some proposal, then they are listening very carefully what all anti-European media or alternative media in Europe are saying, and they use arguments from this alternative media, and slowly they adopt that as a law. And then you have the another point, and this point is how you implement all of this. And that is something very strange. Why? We have in Europe right now confusion. Why? On one side, we have Mitterrand, we have Macron, who want to be new Mitterrand, but without any real support and power in France. On the other side, he wants to be a leader of European Union. On the other side, you have Friedrich Merz, who even today, as a German chancellor, doesn't have 15% voters behind him. So you have in France, in Netherlands, in Belgium, in Germany, in Italy, right-wing conservative parties who are really slowly became stronger and stronger. On the other side, you have former Eastern European countries where you have opposite story. You have social democrats or this so-called the Democratic Party who are more near to the center, who are now on the ruling position. And on Scandinavian countries and Baltic countries, you have Marxist Leninists who are even today. Kaja Kallas is former Marxist Leninist, and he is now foreign minister of European Union, so to say. So this is total confusion. And maybe we need to come back on the main elements to understand. Here we are speaking about logic, we are speaking about strategic dilemma, and we are speaking about narratives. But when we come a little bit closer to the main points, I will just give you a few examples. Our colleague Arno says before a few minutes, people are preparing for the war against Russia, or there was in the time of Iran war, there were media coverage. We are at the beginning of the world war, blah blah blah. Nonsense, nonsense. Why? When you go deeper, then you will find out the generation set in Germany, and 68% of the generation set in Germany will never take military equipment to go in a war, but they are expecting that the state should protect them. So we have these discrepancies inside of the social and society structure inside of the Germany and inside of the France, of course. But if if you allow me, I would like to go a little bit back and to tell you that actually we have here one and the same problem, and this proxy war against Russia through Ukraine and proxy war through Iran against China and India, because China, India, and that part of Asia were the only who really suffer in the time of U.S. and Iranian war, and not Europe so much. Europe suffered indirectly because of some other things. But we have these two proxy wars. What we have here? We have here sovereign debts, and debts which are today on a such a level that all so-called highly industrial countries, they cannot escape from these debts, and they cannot find the solution how to solve this problem. And inside of United Nations system, I remember very well because I was on many of such conferences in that time at the beginning of 90s. People discuss would these sovereign debts grow up? If they grow up, this means that the legitimacy of political parties and political ruling regimes or ruling governments will weak globally. And I agree with Dr. Sharma from India, who says before a few minutes, we have global phenomenon, lack of democracy, trusts. And this is the main point. So all those crises are just a reflection of some huge problem. And even Greek Minister of Finance Varoufakis, before a few days, he says, problem of Europe is that Europe was actually built after 1979 on a concept of European Union as monetary union, as Euro Union, and Eastern European countries joined European Union only because of the money. They didn't understand that they need to follow some standards, etc., etc. So the whole concept was very, 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 very crazy. And this concept cannot survive on a long run. And now I'm coming on a main problem. Main problem we had actually seen before 35 years. That was on the first international United Nations International Human Rights Conference, which was held in Vienna. And I was attending that conference. Conference was around 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, there were no joint common declaration. There was pro forma joint common declaration, but no real substantial declaration.
Okay.
And I remember that because on that human rights conference, we find out that the all countries were divided in 3 different blocks. On one side, European Union, United States. On another side, China, Arab world, and Africa and Latin America on third sides. All parts of the world, representatives from all parts of the world had agreed on that conference that we will live in the future in one global society. Perfect. But the next question was, what should be the basic rules in that conference, in such a world? And they didn't agree about those rules. And everything else, together with sovereign debts of the countries, actually has produced this mess what we have today. And I think that in the future we will have a reflection of all those problems even more, because on one side we have China with as only country with internet sovereignty, India which is following that, and on another side we have Europe, who just before a few days they say we want to have our own Google browser, and to kick out from Europe Google, and Netflix and all other American products. Crazy situation, but the problem is what former Chinese Minister of Defense says. We will live in a future global world, but who should make the rules or under which we should all live in that global world?
Absolutely. And that is actually the question on the table, understanding the limitations of this democratic shield with change that has remained constant, and with multipolarity already in practice. Coming to you, Dragana Trikovic, we just heard about the normative power, and which we think to an extent is no longer relevant with the new dynamics of a multipolar society, where we have new and emerging powers, and of course with the total failure of the old world order. So at this juncture, how can we probably set some sort of an understanding on to how to reconcile the philosophy of Europe setting the roles for the global world, and of course ensuring that this democratic shield doesn't work with the ideology of Nazism and other very inhumane policies that do not actually crown the very existence of humanity in its moral compass.
Yes, I think that not European Union, but Europe will be the last member of multipolar world. Why? Because they are trying to protect this policy of neocolonialism, of neo-Nazism, probably this mechanisms to work against the free people. And I think that situation in Europe is the worst. Even in the United States, it's better. Yes, I listened very carefully. The Penny and Julia also said about the case of Professor Dan Kovalik. But anyway, we can hear some voices from the United States against of this policy of repression, against of Zionism, for example, of this what is happening in the Palestine, for example. But in European Union, in Europe, you cannot hear these things. There is a fight against people who are protesting against this, what Israel is doing in Palestine, in Middle East. And the police is really brutal against the protesters in the European Union. So I also don't agree with my good friend, Professor Zoran Vitorovic. He said that Switzerland is a little bit better placed than the rest of EU, of European Union, of Europe. But also I remember the case of a very famous military expert, Jacques Bolt, who is sanctioned because of his political position, because of his analysis. They canceled his bank account and he couldn't pay the bills and buy the food in the Switzerland. This happened in Switzerland. So Europe is totally disaster, really. And also Penny mentioned the Greece democracy. I will say they established Greece democracy in the time and the system when they have a slavery, when they have a slave. So today's European Union policy is the same, you know. The democracy is for chosen people, for establishment, for political establishment, and not for regular people. So they're acting like in Orwell's book Animal Farm, you know. this is democracy and this is only for chosen people, and the other people don't have any rights. And it's literally like this in European Union, especially when we speak about free speech and journalism. It's just not allowed. And we can see, for example, in Palestine, how many journalists died because journalists became the targets, literally. And all these mechanisms are very familiar to me, even from the time of 90s, from the time of breakup of Yugoslavia, because it was the same. It was the same. They used the same mechanism like sanctions, economic sanctions, like propaganda, very dirty propaganda against the people, and all other mechanisms that are using now against Russia and Iran as well. It's the same. They didn't change anything, so they canceled free speech. They canceled free journalism in time of 90s. If you remember, in the time of 90s, in the time of invasion on Iraq, they decided to open press center in Qatar, I think, and they bring the military officers for briefing. So they didn't want to allow to journalists to go to the military zone and to see and to write what they see. They just wanted to the journalists repeat that military officer says. So they think that it's normal to monopolize the journalism, to monopolize the free speech. So they continue to act like this, and among the developments I consider the most with the European Union are the increasing restrictions on freedom of expression and the marginalization of independent voices that advocate alternative geopolitical perspective. There is also growing concern over the treatment of opposition parties and instances where elections outcomes that do not align with the preferences of the Brussels establishments are challenged or politically constant. Additionally, I see also an increasing politicization of both EU institutions and the institutions of member states, including concerns about the independence of judicial and the participation that legal processes are influenced by political considerations rather than operating with full institutional autonomy. So there are many examples of persecution in European countries. I mentioned Jacques Bod, but there is also the case of the professor Alexander Gaponenko in Latvia, in Riga. He is in jail. Court decided to give him 10 years only because he speak at the scientific conference. His speech was on the genocide, ethnocide against the Russians in Baltic states. And there are also too many other examples in Germany, in the other European countries, where the people are prosecuted only because they are telling the truth. So I already mentioned my example as well. I'm now on the list of sanctions, banned from entering in the Schengen zone because of my political opinion. And this came from the Greece, this cradle of democracy. So Greece secretly entered me to the Schengen informational system and forbid me to enter in the European Union. And I couldn't do anything. I even 1 year after this, I don't have any decision. I wrote to the Minister of Police of Greece. I wrote to parliamentarians. I wrote to ombudsman as well. So I didn't get any reply. And recently, I will finish with this. Recently, former Minister of Finance of Greece, Yanis Varoufakis, said that Greece became the fortress of Israel. I think this is the big problem. So they are not controlling their own country anymore. And European Union and European establishment as well, they don't care about their own citizens, the opinion of their own people. They are just not protecting the interest of our people. They are protecting the interest of some global structures, of corporation, of Israel lobby, and so on.
Asking the question, how can these actually mitigate the crisis raging across the globe with you, Shirab? Here we are looking at the parameters that are used to measure information to be able to call it as some sort of harmful to the citizen, and at the same time we are looking at the same parameters that will check the legitimate comments, especially from politicians with opposing views against the existing government. Let's try to see how we can, come to a compromise of bringing, the two together, checking misinformation, and of course, giving the free space for people with alternative information, especially on issues that have, global concern. We are talking about the crisis in the Middle East. We are talking about, of course, the Ukraine crisis that has taken another dimension, and the economic wars that we are seeing across the globe.
Well, for many years and many decades, rather, there has been questions on democratic backsliding, and we have, particularly the countries in the global south, they have been receiving sermons, lectures on and those parameters of democratic backsliding and the problems with. But we do not have to go far away. We have one victim of with the barriers that have been raised for Ms. Dragana for speaking her mind and having a different political opinion. So that shows about that shows the hypocrisy that European or the Europe or particularly the European Union has been living up to. Now coming to what Professor Viktorik was saying, that Europe or EU happens to be a normative power, but we have to also understand the epistemic foundation of normative power. What are the norms on which the European Union or the Europe is based? Uh, you know, we all have heard about Huntington's class of civilization thesis, but he wrote another book, and in 2004 he wrote a book, Who Are We, where he says that in America has a very exceptionalist idea of Anglo-Saxon Protestant model, and there is individualistic belief. What does define, or how does EU define itself? It certainly does not have roots of what it is trying to protect in Europe, because until 1900 most of Europe was not democratic. Remember till 1950s, as 1950s, 60s, most of Europe was not exercising universal adult franchise. As a matter of fact, when India gained independence in 1950, and India rolled out universal adult franchise, most of the commentators from Europe and West, they said that this is not going to work in India. And Sir Ivor Jennings, the noted constitutionalist, he said that no, the Indian constitution is going to falter, it's going to fail in few years. But we have been standing strong for last 8 decades. So the problem is that Europe has been trying to carve or to invent a new idea of democracy without realizing the fundamental of democracy, that is dialogue, that is participation, open space. If you deny people the voice that they have, if you deny the opposition voices, if you deny the open space that offers and that help bring in these institutions to a position of respect across the world, then you're denying the very essence of democracy itself. And then there is no you know use of having any shield, because what it essentially does is It is not going to shield democracy from backsliding. It is rather going to shield your incompetence, your own internal problems, your own contradictions. So in that sense, Europe needs to look within and see where the problems are coming emerging from. Why do we see a continuous political turmoil in Britain? Why do we see frequent elections and in France? What are the problems in Germany? Why do we see the continuous movement towards the right wing and far right in many of these countries which took pride in being the leader of a liberal institutional order? And then to also look back in history and to correct some of the mistakes, because remember, as Europe industrialized and as it expanded, the philosophers of the liberal institutional order, they found themselves in a philosophical bind. Now at home they had to preach the ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity, in pursuit of happiness. And the same people, they had to create an ideological device to a rational to justify the injustices being committed in in the colonies. And leaders and philosophers like John Locke, B.J. Mill, they were active shareholders of East India Company and the Royal Company in Africa. At home they were writing on liberty, they were singing pains for liberal order, but they were also justifying the ideas. I think that tendency has not left Europe till today, and there are problems within, but they are not ready to look within and rather uh, trying to devise new phenomena like this democratic shield. But to my mind, it is nothing more than a shield to protect their own incompetence.
Indeed, when the interest of the few is what is of utmost importance, many questions actually surface on the table for discussion, and asking who actually is benefiting from the democratic shield. If we want to take it with you, Penny, from the perspective of the African continent, we saw recently how the government or the leadership of Burkina Faso was very direct on severing ties with France, and of course pertaining infringement of sovereignty in every aspect. And we also know that democracy patterns accommodating, but then we'll discover that recently the anti-immigration laws in Europe have been very unfriendly or inhumane to many nationals. Then we want to look at it, this pillar of democratic shield, from the aspect of humanity, on maybe people-to-people diplomacy, and the place of the order in Europe in line with immigration policies, and then extended hand of the infringement in the revolutionary nations, particularly by France.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Clarissa. Yes, it is. It is. Burkina Faso did officially cut ties with France. They have asserted their sovereignty with the Alliance of Sahel States, and they are partnering with strategic partners like China and even other countries like Canada, and whoever's willing to respect their sovereignty and operate on a win-win economic basis. As far as the anti-immigration laws, we see a lot of that in the United States as well. It's a backlash against the other extreme, which is complete open borders, because generally immigrants tend to vote Democrat. So there has to be a balance of who's coming in and what is their purpose. But the CIA actually funds a lot of immigration because they'll fund these extremists in other countries to destabilize governments, and then they'll bring them here because they did such a great job, and then they'll terrorize Americans, and then the backlash is, oh, we don't want immigration. And we're seeing that in South Africa as well. But the solution is It's more about economic development. You see how China is building the Belt and Road Initiative. When you build up economies in other countries, they can trade with you and they're not so desperate to flee their situation. You see the economic development in Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger. With especially in Burkina Faso, you have tomato factories processing 100,000 tons of tomatoes every day. The agro-pastoral and fishing offensive, they're investing in fishing cages and wheat processing and textiles, and even the Sofitex, the textile mill, invests in seeds for farms to get the right kinds of seeds, and they support women cooperatives as well. So it's a circular economy that we're seeing develop in the Alliance of Sahel states, but they are building it with strategic alliances. So I can understand the backlash against mass immigration, but the cause of it is not seen. The media doesn't tell you, oh, well, you know, we just kidnapped the president of Venezuela and there's all these earthquakes. Well, why is that? Why are all these people fleeing? Why is there poverty? Well, America's been stealing and Europe has been stealing resources and keeping these nations underdeveloped. So the solution is not about immigration versus not immigration and hating immigrants, but if we want a stable economy, we need to join the rising economy of BRICS, of Shanghai Cooperation, of the Global South, like the Alliance of Sahel States, and build up each other so that everyone can have economic development. And that's really going to be the solution for the multipolar world is win-win cooperation. And for example, in America, we advocate, the Center for Political Innovation advocates building the Peace Bridge across the Bering Strait. And I know that Dimitri Karel tweeted out at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum that there were American engineers that actually signed a contract for the designs for that Peace Bridge, which would pivot America away from NATO and away from that old order of Wall Street and London and like Trump getting all his money from insider trading. It would promote development in Russia and Alaska and bring us more towards a physical economy. And that would solve a lot of the mass migration crisis. Instead of just hating immigrants, let's help them build their country and we all win in the process.
Indeed, winning in a process and giving a value or importance to the concept of the world being a global village. And we are coming back to you, Professor Juran. Here we are looking at how probably Europe can, you know, present a different narrative to the world. It has actually, in this democratic shield, highlighted China, Russia, and Iran and other countries emerging and, of course, changing the status quo of the global order into a new reality that is giving new definitions to, you know, aspects of global importance. So now that it has been portrayed, or critics have actually defined this democratic shield as some sort of an authoritarian, you know, centralization, and of course a project that protects globalist control. How do you think the stakeholders in Europe, or what do you think they can do practically to, you know, present a clearer trajectory of this democratic shield that will not present the way it is presenting surely as, you know, protecting the interest of the collective West or a selective few against majority of the world, with emerging and different ideologies about the systems?
I think that I had understood your question, and I'm laughing not because of your question, I'm laughing because of logic. Namely, this shield is just one element of normative power. This element is just something new mechanism which they will develop after that. As my dear colleague Dragana says, she is banned to travel to the European Union and nobody is in a charge if you are accused against something, even in United States. And I like that system. Why? Because if you are accused for something, you can go on a court, you can try to discuss, maybe you can find some agreement, and both sides could clarify own standing points, etc. But in Europe, we don't have that. And just one small correction to my dear colleague and friend Dragana. This Swiss military expert, Jacques Bois, who used to work for Swiss strategic contra secret service, he is living actually in Belgium. And yes, he's a Swiss expert, but he's living because of his job, previous jobs in Belgium, and they block a money transfer from Switzerland to Belgium. So he was not in position to take physically his money. He has his money on a bank in the Swiss, but he cannot use it because even Swiss banks must follow this FACTA agreement, FACTA agreement, which Swiss has with United States and European Union. So if somebody is on that list, immediately you are, let's say, blocked to use your finances. That is very simple. We are speaking here about one shield. Shield is just one element. For me, is something else, much deeper problem. When you go in any strategic analysis, if you make any strategical concept, whatever strategy is, military, civilian, political strategy, media strategy, always you must answer on, give answers on one question: what do you want? And this is the main problem with Europe. If Europe inside of European elite is so divided, and even in Europe you have so many critics on Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and she is under the pressure of investigation about the corruption in the time of COVID. And just to come back on the time of COVID, if you follow just what has happened inside of the Europe with the vaccine, how Czech just confiscates the vaccine which came from Russia, sent from Russia to Italy, and nobody excuses for that move. When several African countries come to Europe and say, please, we don't have money to buy vaccine, can you provide us, etc., they even were very arrogant. A lot of European government representatives were very arrogant, and they say, no way, you need to pay, etc., etc. So this actually shows you the reality. When one crisis comes, then you see the reality. Then you see how they are actually, what is behavior of these people, and what is the logic which is coming behind all of this. And now we are speaking about the proxy war against Russia. I don't know, this against China to Iran, etc. We have another problem. Venezuela is the best example that some part of American elites who are creating foreign policy had understood one thing. They learned a lesson from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Libya, that they cannot just copy paste their own political model, free speech, I don't know, law and order, because you have a local mentality and local culture. So they keep the present, 2/3 of the present political establishment in Venezuela, but they put them under pressure. You will do what we want and everything is fine. But in general terms, we have problem with something else. We have problem with the logic. We have problem with the standing points. And I remember very well when Germany was actually, the German politicians were, through Angela Merkel, former chancellor, then to Schröder, to many others, who actually traveled to Moscow, and they pleased them months and months to start with this Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 project. That was German project. And Russians at the end say, okay, no problem, you can have it because it's cheap energy for you. You make profit, we make profit, that's okay. But when they cut this pipeline, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz traveled, and I remember very well how that was reflected even in the German media. He went to Senegal, pleased them for some support, to Algeria, even to Iran. They traveled. They traveled to South Africa, and in South Africa they saw the several these huge ships from Russia with oil, etc. And they say, oh, what is this? And South Africans tell them, okay, sorry, we're a sovereign country, we can do whatever we want. We should not follow your policy because you're European Union and you have in European Union your own rules which we respect. But we can do what we want. And that is the problem of autism. That is the problem of logic. Today, even in Europe, when you see what they are talking about the Trump administration, what they are talking about Biden administration, you will be shocked. I mean, this is as that you are speaking against your enemy and not your allies. So this logic is really crazy, and at the same time, you are sitting in one place where the situation is going to be worse and worse and worse. And social pressure is everywhere. Today, even in Germany, this AfD, Alternative for Germany, has 28 or 29% of the voters behind them. And even Union, SPD, CDU doesn't have so much. But they are as blind people. They close eyes and say, no, nothing has happened. Everything will be fine tomorrow morning when I wake up. And then you have the situation what you have. And then India come, President Modi come and they say, oh, please help us. We need special trade agreement with you, etc. We need this and that. And Modi says, okay, no problem. But let's clarify some things before that. And let's put it on very simple, in very simple sentences. When last time the president of Syria, new president, was in Germany, Germany invite him, they welcome him with the red carpet. Everything was fine. Everything was excellent, except one thing. In the moment when Germany says, okay, can you take your 700,000 refugees, which we take from Syria, who are now working in Germany, can you take them back now in Syria? When this president says no, from that moment, he was again terrorist. He was again someone who is working against European interests. So, excuse me, this is a selfishness. This has nothing to do with the democracy. And democracy is a very nice thing. But I think that even more democracy we have today in Brazil, in Switzerland, even in China, than what we have in Europe. Because I agree with Dragan, the problem is in Europe with whom you are talking. And in Europe, they are split on many, many different parts. Even now, they have another problem. They're speaking about a war against Russia, etc. And then you can read the generation set in Germany, 78% say, no, we will never take gun to go in war against Russia, but country, state should protect us. In the same time, French producer and German producer for military producer who should produce together Rafale 2, the new superpower jet, etc. They come in conflict. Even Macron and Merz were not in a situation to solve that problem. Why? Because selfishness. Again, we are speaking about selfishness. We are speaking about the logic, and we need to change this logic. And when someone from Europe comes and say, we are united European Union, yes, that's fine. European Union must show on political level that they are united, that they follow the same policy, etc. That's fine. And the only what they have is, okay, guys from Bulgaria, Romania, you elected new government. If you don't follow the main line of European Union, we will not give you another tranche of money. So I just cut your finances and that's it. But on the long run, this cannot give you positive results. And the differences which we have inside of the European Union are much bigger than we can even expect it to see this, because whenever they are talking, especially those who are militarists, who are for military solutions against Iran, against Russia, etc. They even didn't visit those countries. They say, but at least at the end of the day, in Europe we have 480 million inhabitants. Fine, but how many we have in India? 1.6 billion or 1.7? I don't know, Dr. Sharma. Maybe you can give us the fact. And that is a problem. That is a problem. Look, everything began from logic. Second problem, which I personally I'm always putting that on top one of any agenda when we are talking, is education, education, education. Look now what we have in Europe. Look now what we have in Europe. The 2/3 of the scholars from primary and secondary school in the time of Corona, they were not in position in Germany to follow online classes. Why? Because at home they didn't have money to have laptop computers. And we're talking about Europe, about fine developed Europe. Excuse me, something is wrong. On the other side, how much China, India invest in education? How much Brazil is investing in education? A lot. And then you see the results on the long run.
Absolutely, Professor. And of course, it is imperative to know the risks on the ground and see how a new agenda can actually be put together, the one that will not only serve the interests of globalists, but then will serve the interest of humanity. And you talked about an alternative, and that is why we want to see, an alternative platform. Let's be particular with the April 2026 International Scientific and Practical Conference on ensuring and observing, and of course, observation and expertise of electoral processes, also ensuring democracy. Can this be an alternative or solution to the paradox nature of this European democratic shield that is actually not favoring, growth and development at the lower level?
Yes, for sure, dear Clarice. I think it's alternative structure, not under control of Western powers. It's a totally independent structure, and in the past we have a problem not only because of monopolizing the truth, monopolizing the journalism, but also monopolizing the missions of observing missions of elections. That was also fully under control of Western structures. And we know that people who they didn't control, they also put the stamp on these people that they are some Russian agents or some extremists or so on. So this is also that was the mechanism to control the elections in other countries. So this is very important, this organization which we recently organized, because now we have a totally new platform for developing and for researching elections. I am sure that European Union will not allow to us to observe the election in European countries, but anyway, I think the things in Europe will not be changed till then the Europeans change the political elites. Because the main problem in Europe, the main problem is in European elites, because they are totally ignoring reality. They are fighting between themselves in European Union. As Zoran said, they are not united at all. They are fighting between themselves, and instead to find some common interests for Europe, for European continent, they are totally ignoring all the problems, and they are just working on achieving the interest of these global structures, the interest of the corporation or some foreign lobbies. This is their main job, unfortunately. So Europe needs to change their elites, political elites, and I think they are afraid because of this, and that is why they are banning AfD in Germany, and also this National Front in the France and in the all other countries. They are also trying to discredit totally opposition because they are afraid. They know really that the people in Europe are not supporting these political elites. And for example, recently I read it in some European newspapers, some information about that only 78% of people in Russia are supporting the president of Russia. but it's insane because in European countries, Merz, I think he has 13% of support now, and you cannot find so high a level of support in any European country of the mainstream elites. This is the problem. AfD in the Germany has more support now than mainstream elites. And so it's insane to comment like that, you know. On my opinion, the Russia is the most democratic country in Europe. But if you say this in Brussels or anywhere in the European Union, they will accuse you immediately that you are the agent of Russia, or that you are insane, or that you're extremists, and so on. So in one moment, they must stop ignoring reality. They are continuing to ignore reality because they don't have a plan B. They don't know even what to say to their own citizens, because they invest all to Ukrainian conflict. They invest money and everything to fight against Russia, and they cannot now just say, so it was a big mistake and what to do, because it will be the overall their political careers. So they are continuing, no matter that. I think they realize as well that they will not achieve anything in this Ukrainian conflict, but they are continuing with this. So we need a full reset. We need totally new political elites in Europe. Maybe in the future we will have opportunity to observe the election and to see this that new political elites are coming. But now, as we see, nothing is changing in the better way. Unfortunately, Europe is really going in the wrong direction. And I think taking together this trans race broader question about democratic accountability, political pluralism, and the rule of law within the European Union. And I think a democratic system is strengthened not by suppressing opinions, but by allowing open debates, protecting political competition, and ensuring that institutions remain impartial and independent of day-to-day political interests. So when we achieve this, then we can speak about future of Europe. And before this, we will just watching disintegration, fights in Europe, and nothing good.
Juncture, we ask how this check or control on events is actually affecting the flow of information, especially across borders. Coming back to you, Shima, let's look at the risks and opportunities. We've highlighted the pillars of the democratic shield and the area of conflict or contrast, and then it's about risks and opportunities for countries still within Europe. And here is how they can balance the tenets of this democratic shield with internal sovereignty, internal security, and even the openness in local policies. Where can we bring a balance in assessing the risks, and of course capitalizing on the opportunities for the betterment of the population, and not the selective few?
Well, to answer your question, I believe that to have an open participatory system is non-negotiable for any democratic society. But before that, let me answer Professor Joran's question that we are around 1.5 billion, Professor Joran, and India is conducting its decennial survey census now. So we expect it to be crossing 1.5 billion mark. Yeah. And still not a member of Permanent Council, UNSC Permanent Council, to state that. So now coming to what are the risks. Risks are very obvious that as has been stated by all the panelists that it is going to create ruptures in the society. There are going to be problems, and the very essence on the foundation on which the democratic institutional framework was imagined, it is going to break down if you're not going to allow people to speak and if you're not going to allow different opinions to be a part of the social uh, you know. Uh, dialogue mechanism, it is not going to work. But I also think that European Union needs to understand the time in which it was framed. Even after the Peace of Westphalia in Section 48, Europe was, and most of the European powers were largely at war with each other. Particularly France, Germany, and Britain. They were fighting each other not only in Europe but in different parts of the world. So what actually happened after the Second World War was that they got to smell the coffee. They realize that this is not the world that they have been enjoying, and they have been ruling actually for centuries, and they have to come together as a bloc to come over and get over their vulnerabilities. Now this is the time in present time, Europe, as rightly mentioned by Dragana and Professor Joran, that Europe is as divided as ever, and there's, you won't find a single issue on which there is complete unanimous support or consensus. So Europe needs to wake up and live to the reality of the time, accept that there are other players, accept that there are other players and there are other participants who can also have logical contributions to the idea of democracy. And I would like to quote what Benjamin Franklin said, that those who would like to give up essential secure liberty to purchase a little bit of security, they deserve neither security nor liberty. So you cannot trade liberty with security. Both of them have to go together. And if you are going to create a system where you are going to offer either of them, and if you are going to, uh, have a theoretical framework where your security gets assured only when your liberty is curtailed, then that becomes very problematic, and that is where Europe needs to be a more the homogenized understanding of democracy, liberty needs to give way to a more inclusive and participatory approach, needs to learn from different mechanisms, and as Professor Joran was rightly mentioning out, there are good examples coming up from global south also. Europe need to get over that it does not always need to be in the mode of proselytizing and sending civilizing missions to different parts of the world. They can also learn from the things that have been that have been doing well, and stop lecturing on all the issues, start learning.
In data, it is imperative to welcome the new realities. And with you, Penny, according to one of a researcher by name Norman Lewis, this democratic shield was actually, or is a tool that the European Union and other nations in Europe, beg your pardon, are using to control or check, especially governments that do not largely align with its, some of its military decisions. We are taking the case study which he mentioned, the past Hungarian elections that saw Viktor Orban being defeated, and he actually said that this tool was used in Hungary to be able to replace Viktor Orban, who has been very defiant based on Europe's decision regarding the Ukraine crisis and other aspects which he saw were not actually helping in the development, especially of smaller nations. So at this juncture, we want to look at that point where we make recommendations that can still give relevance. Of course, we are not totally, downplaying the initiative, but then how can the strategy be that one that it's very open to the new realities of global transformation, new realities of international politics, and of course, new realities that give meaning to the concept of globalization and interactions among nations across diverse borders?
Yes, thank you for the question, Clarissa. Yeah, it is very blatant, the interference in Hungary. The the United States also has a long history of interfering in elections through the CIA, through color revolutions. Naomi Klein, the shock doctrine really outlines that. So yeah, as the economic crisis continues in Europe, because they're not adapting to the new realities of a higher mode of production based on win-win cooperation instead of the colonial mode of production, which is just theft, or imperialism, globalism, which holds back development, like they did in India. British burned the looms, even though India was producing cloth for centuries. So Europe, the whole idea of the European Union actually was put forth by Trotsky, who thought that the New World Order would come through New York and the quote unquote civilized world. And I believe it was Lenin who opposed it, because that would make the imperialist powers even stronger. And as our previous guest, Mr. Sarab Sharma, said, that it was formed to legitimize their strength against the decolonization of the world. So until they get in their heads that they are not the dominant force anymore, that the new economy is actually a better way, then the economic crisis is going to deepen. So I like our previous guest said, that it doesn't seem that Europe is ready to learn that question. And as far as unity, there is division in the ruling class, but that is actually a good thing, because it gives a crack for mass movements to unite. The hardest part in uniting the working class is that the manipulative games that the imperialists play, like they did in the years of lead in Italy, they armed all these Davids against one Goliath, you know, and in Ireland, the Red Brigades. It's just a constant game of getting us to fight with each other, instead of understanding that it's the economic system that's run by Wall Street in London, which is based on speculative capital and usury instead of a physical economy, like we see in BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation and the Alliance of Sahel States and Bolivarianism. These movements are gaining in strength, and we, in the heart of the empire, have a responsibility to educate the masses of that higher mode of production, of win-win trade, of physical economy that's not based on theft, but that's based on innovationism, that human labor is the source of all wealth. The imperialist globalists don't see it that way. They think the way to solve the economic crisis is to depopulate, to reduce the human population. And so they come up with all kinds of schemes, like in Europe with the fertilizers and the green policies. It's not about protecting the environment, it's about reducing the amount of food. But we see in Africa, especially Burkina Faso, they're having this agricultural boom with the agro-pastoral and fishing offensive. And they have strategic alliances with countries who are willing to cooperate with them in a win-win trade. So I don't think the elites themselves are ready to learn, are ready to capitulate, especially when they depend on Daddy Trump to lead the way, because he's not helping either. But as I mentioned before, if America can unite with Russia and build that Bering Strait peace bridge, that would be a global shift, and it would move the huge military force of America away from NATO and the oppressive economy to supporting these newly developing nations. So again, I don't think the elites want to learn, but if the masses can unite, and take advantage of those cracks in the ruling class, then there is hope for Europe as well.
Indeed, and this brings us to the last phase of VETA, which, of course, we highlight recommendations and checks for accountability. Just with you, Professor Ziren, your take-home message as we continue to analyze the strengths and limitations of Europe's democratic shield. So, what checks and balances prevent this democratic shield from becoming some sort of a tool for political censorship, if it's actually not it?
This shield will be there. They will be for political censorship. I'm absolutely convinced that that will follow that idea. But that there is something else. With this shield, if European Union elites, which are now running EU, will continue, they will come in situation to be globally totally isolated. I will give you a few examples. Namely, we are speaking about the new reality. Yes, new reality from one standing point. That the Africa, Latin America, and Asia, they have learned the lesson. They have learned that they don't need European Union elites. They have enough capacity, enough good educated people that they can together swim better. The only problem for global South, so to say, was economic power with Chinese support and investment. This has been totally shifted, changed. And I agree with Ms. Penny that actually America is total another story than European Union. Why? Because I will remember you on something. In a time of sanctions on Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Serbia and Montenegro in 90s, the biggest headquarter of IBM was in Belgrade, in Serbia. But Serbia was under the sanction. Yeah, sure. But those sanctions, Americans put so on international level that the European Union actually followed, but not American companies. Even today is the same story. One of the biggest Hilton hotels is in Belgrade, in Serbia. So I gave you answer on many questions with those few things. So what I think we have here something what will at the end of the day destroy the basis of European Union structure, social structure, and those are sovereign debts of the countries. If you go deeper, and everyone is speaking about American debts, yes, but you need to go in the structure to see this the debts, how they are relocated, located, etc. Only 50% of the total American debts are in the hands of China and other countries outside of United States. Everything else is inside of United States. This means this is one very pragmatic system that one agency is in a debt to another debt to the public, etc., etc. But American system is so constructed that this is as a spiral which is going on. So they are pragmatic and they test one model. Okay, this can work. Let's adopt that. This cannot work. It's something what make problems. Let's cut this, etc. And this is the only country in the world which has this model of society and the structure. When they need some good educated people with good ideas, they just go and they take them to the United States, give them material and other basis, and those people help America to be developed. I will remember you also two things. Till 1958, and I think Dragana will say something about that, in Belgium was still worked human zoo, where humans were treated from Africa as animals. That was till 1958. So what about we are talking? We are talking about all the elites, old European logic. We are talking about elites from UK who say, yes, English tea at 5. Excuse me, but tea comes from India. Or China, but mostly from India. So this is not English pattern, this is Indian, etc. So we need to understand one thing. I mean, they need to understand, those guys who are running the things. The biggest enemy of them is sitting at home by them. In the morning, when they need to look them in the mirror, that is the biggest enemy. They need to understand that some things are as they are, and they need to understand. I need to excuse myself what I had done in Africa, in Asia, genocide in Namibia, in Angola. This what's happening now in Middle East. Not to speak about India, where they have tried to stolen everything what was possible to be stolen, or in China with opium war, etc. So those are the facts, and those are the historical facts, which are not too old. They're maybe 1 or 2 generations old, at least 3 generations. And then we have another thing. The oldest university in Europe was established on a territory of one city with name Ohrid in Macedonia, which was part of Tito's Yugoslavia, not in UK, not in France. It was in Ohrid in Macedonia. But nobody will tell you this. Why? Because tradition, you will fight with arrogance and with aggression. So the first world school, robotic school, where they produced the first exoskeleton robots, etc., was 1961, established in Belgrade, in Serbia, in Tito's Yugoslavia. Even today, in Japan and United States, they use that school knowledge as a basis for developing of robotics, and not to speak about some other things. So, if we are speaking about such things, uh, I don't know. I think that Europe is going in wrong direction. I agree with Dragana, but they will kill themselves with own mechanism and with own system. If you don't invest in education, if you don't try at least to establish bridges, as Miss Penny says, between Russia and Americans, if you don't try to find alternative for the present crisis, then you will have a situation what you have, and they will come in a situation to be totally isolated from all part of the world, and the rest of the world will develop themselves, will not go into war, will not fight. And I think this old logic is not old logic, it's simply the logic which is at the end, because they don't have cheap energy from Russia in Europe, they don't have possibility to steal the resources from Africa. And then they have another problem. They didn't invest in own education. Look, just let's come. This will be the last sentence from me for today. Just look this World Cup. Look at this very famous nation. All of them, oh, superpower, football for superpower. Yes, but I think that with the help of FIFA and the other guys, they go in next round, not because of the quality of the football what they play. But look what they have. They have in Africa academy for football. They have in India. They have in China. They have in Japan. So the world is developing them in all possible segments, from sports to education to everything else, but not in Europe. In Europe, they are going down. And this is a problem. You can be blind, but as soon as you wake up and look yourself in the mirror, maybe you will try at least to find some good answers and solutions for your problem, and not always to accuse someone else that he is guilty. No, you are on your own guilty if you make something wrong. Excuse me, that was a sentence from me for today. I think what was enough.
Thank you so much, Professor Zirena. Coming to you, Dragana Trikovic. Your take-home message and recommendation, especially with this censorship. Let's try to see how the authorities in Europe can curtail too much censorship, so as not to create some atmosphere of distrust and confusion among the audience in Europe. We're talking about, checking information and preventing the entire European population from consuming an alternative information that actually situates the realities of the new world, especially in the 21st century.
Yes, I totally agree with Professor Zoran Vitorovic that the biggest enemy of Europe is sitting in the Brussels, in the Brussels administration. So Europe, if continue to act like this, will totally destroy the European Union. They will destroy the European authority, and they are working now very hardly on this, unfortunately. unfortunately. So I really appreciate that we can discuss openly on all these topics. I'm very happy that I can discuss with the colleagues from United States, from India, from Africa as well, from other European countries, because everywhere you can find the people who understands what is really going on and who are brave enough to speak, because today it's really not easy to speak openly, and you need to be brave, because it's necessary to know that you can be under sanctions, that you can sacrifice yourself because speaking the truth. But it's also from the ancient time that I think Plato said that, or Aristotle, that some people don't like to hear the truth. So I'm very happy that I'm speaking with the people who likes to tell the truth. And for the future, I think we need to continue with this kind of discussions, and I'm a very big optimist, and I think that Europe cannot stand too long with this kind of policy. And I hope so that soon we will see some changes in Europe, in European Union. And I'm very thankful for all participants in today's program. And I want to send big regards from Serbia to all my friends. And I think we need to continue to fight for the truth and to fight for good changes. And I'm sure that these good changes will for sure come. Some a good wind of change, not this one from the Scorpion songs, because their wind of change was totally wrong. I think the real good changes for sure will come. So I'm very positive in this way.
Wind of change that will meet the existing realities of international politics, of shifting alliances and of new alliances. And of course, this can be cemented with factual and authentic information. With you, Shirab, we want to look at how the social media space, especially with the existence of the artificial intelligence, can be used somehow to actually mitigate the negative effects of such censorship, and that wouldn't put a population in some sort of a situation of uncertainty and doubt, especially in interpreting international processes and for better insertion into the realities of the global world.
AI can be a double-edged sword, and it can have pernicious repercussions. It can be made to great use. But let me also talk about, and what we have missed is in 2010 and the decade that followed, there was a big scandal on related to Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica was before AI became a buzzword. And remember, there were many attempts made to examine to have a link to get it linked with Russia, but it was not established. But even before there was any Russian link to it, there were issues of data manipulation, or what they call data poisoning. So it is not something new. AI is just exacerbating the already existing issues to a great scale and with a great speed. So that challenge remains, but AI also gives you the ecosystem to prevent from such violations of human interference in data and privacy violations. So in that sense, like Dragana says, I'm also an optimist that you will take hold of these changes, and AI can be emboldened to make you to be used in a more positive way, and to protect the violations that they cause. But having said that, I do not want to discount that the role of EU in toto. EU still has a much important role to play sans its bureaucratic mess that it has created. And if Europe tries to bring in reforms, make it a more participatory ecosystem where openness is celebrated, where difference of opinion is accepted, and when there is acceptance for different people, different voices, and when there is no phobia, be it phobia of Russia or phobia of China or India, but a larger acceptance to be able to have good relations with all the powers, to work together in that framework, and I think that would be a good way to go ahead. So by taking nothing away from EU, but with EU present and with EU having all these changes in its structure, I think we can still go ahead in a better way.
Thank you so much, Sharab. And we round off with you, Penny. Of course, with the recommendations of how the democracy can be upheld in the new realities of the world. Recently, we heard President Donald Trump saying that actually there's no Syria without Trump or without USA, and that shows us to the level of infringement. But then this interference, who benefits from it? So let's try to see a recommendation based on where interference is needed, and of course how it benefits the people and not the global elites, like the case we are seeing in the situation in Europe, as per critics.
Thank you for the question, Clarissa. Yes, the arrogance of the imperialist powers in preaching democracy when we are interfering in other countries. I mean, who's running Syria? The head of Al Qaeda, right? Who benefits from that? Well, again, the Wall Street and London elites that are trying to uphold a dying economic system that's based on theft and usury. By holding back development in other countries, they want to benefit the globalist imperialist corporations by not allowing countries to develop. And we're seeing pushback in countries like the Alliance of Sahel States, where they are challenging these corporations. In Mali, they challenged Barrick Gold, and they ended up arresting executives and gold until Barrick complied with their laws. And after that, other companies that had to pay their taxes complied a lot quicker because the resources of the country belong to the people. So as these nations rise up, the global south, and they seek strategic alliances with the new economy that's rising, like BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation, they are going to be stronger. It's about the balance of forces. It's not about whether you have elections and who's monitoring the elections. Yes, that's good, and it's good that Russia is providing that new alternative system for election observation. But it's ultimately up to the nations themselves that are willing to struggle against that system and assert their sovereignty, to reassert their sovereignty, like the representative from Burkina Faso told Togo in the recent summit, that they're not trying to reclaim their sovereignty. They're not trying to gain their sovereignty. They're reclaiming it. They're reclaiming what was taken by colonialism. And so I applaud the Alliance of Sahel States and how they are using their resources to benefit the population. Burkina Faso, the agricultural and pastoral and fishing offensive, the Faso Mevo, Build My Country. You have the Ministry of Agriculture going around to farms and making sure they're growing, and you have other ministries going to villages and telling them how they can build the infrastructure. Faso Mevo, Build My Country. Everyone is participating in building roads and building streets and park benches and planting trees. Everyone is participating, and that's what quote unquote democracy is when the people are involved in building their country and using the resources. We've seen what Western quote unquote democracy does with Libya, Afghanistan, all these countries. So it's up to the developing nations to assert their sovereignty and seek strategic alliances. And we in the imperialist nations must stand in solidarity with them and with their struggle to break free. And that's the hope of the world, is that we, especially in America, can educate the people enough that our enemy is not our neighbor, our enemy is not the immigrants, our enemy is Wall Street and London, and that we need to pivot away from that economy, build the peace bridge, and stand with Alliance of Sahel states and other countries that are breaking free. It's about the balance of forces.
Indeed, it's about actually breaking free from the traditional world order. And this, ladies and gentlemen, tells us that Europe's democracy shield actually sits in the or at the intersection of security, sovereignty, new world order, where we see new alliances being formed, and of course, new definitions of key terms, and of course, we also see that though a democratic shield, implementation becomes very complex because of the agenda that has been caught up in a complex web of between doing it for the interest of the population, or doing it for the collective West or globalists or large corporations that do run the world. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to take this opportunity to thank our esteemed panel for the diverse opinions or insights on our topic for discussions. It is very imperative. It shows how, the big dilemma where Europe is at the moment, and how this is actually challenging the new realities because of censorship, and the fact that international organizations, especially legal organizations, have largely been compromised according to reports. So on this note, I want to say thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for trusting the Pan-African television. We'll continue to bring you topics of utmost importance as we continue to educate through news giving and exchange of information and knowledge. Bye-bye, and do have a blissful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
This program was brought to you by Globus.